A young black CEO, confident and successful, sits at his desk in a sleek, modern office, reviewing plans for an upcoming business deal. Just then, the door swings open, and a woman storms in, her face twisted with disdain. Without so much as a proper introduction, she begins to belittle him, questioning how someone like him could possibly run a company of this stature. Her words drip with ignorance and prejudice, as she assumes she knows everything about him simply based on appearances. But little does she realize she's about to come face to face with a truth that will shatter her assumptions. As her tirade continues, the CEO calmly listens, his demeanor steady, almost as if he knows something she doesn't. What happens next is not just shocking, it's a lesson that will leave her questioning everything she thought she knew. Stay tuned for a story you won't forget. A woman, dressed in an expensive suit, glances around the office, her eyes narrowing as if to find proof that something doesn't add up. The awards on the walls, the sleek furniture, and the view of the city's skyline, it all seems too much for someone like him, at least in her mind. Her voice is sharp as she demands to know how he got here, suggesting that someone must have handed him the position or that it's all a facade. The CEO stays calm, his hands resting lightly on the desk, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He doesn't interrupt her rant, which only seems to frustrate her more. She begins to make assumptions about his background, throwing out baseless comments about his capabilities. Yet, as she talks, she notices the way he looks at her, not with anger, but with quiet confidence. Something about it unsettles her, but she can't stop herself. As the woman continues her tirade, her voice growing louder with every word, she doesn't notice the small group of employees gathering just outside the glass walls of the office. They exchange puzzled looks, clearly uncomfortable but hesitant to interrupt. Inside, the CEO remains composed, his calm demeanor in stark contrast to her fiery accusations. She begins weaving an imaginary story about how he must have used connections or taken shortcuts to get to where he is, her tone dripping with condescension. To her, it seems impossible that someone like him could have worked his way to the top. But as she pauses to catch her breath, she notices something strange. The CEO still hasn't responded. Instead, he leans back in his chair, his expression unreadable. A subtle tension fills the room. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crosses her mind. Is there something she's missing? Why isn't he fighting back? The room feels heavier now, the silence stretching as the woman shifts uncomfortably. She notices the employees outside whispering, some shaking their heads, but she brushes it off, convinced they're just as baffled as she is about the CEO's position. Determined to press further, she steps closer to his desk, her voice dripping with mockery as she questions his education, his experience, even his ability to make decisions for a company of this size. But then something changes. The CEO slowly rises from his chair, his movements deliberate, his eyes locked on hers. For the first time he speaks, his voice calm but firm, and each word seems to cut through her assumptions. "You've had a lot to say about me today," he begins, "but I wondered if you've taken a moment to think about who you're speaking to, or why you even think you're entitled to make these judgments." The tension in the air is palpable as he steps around the desk, standing tall and confident. Her smirk falters slightly, but she doesn't back down, her pride unwilling to let her admit she may have crossed a line. Outside the office, the employees are now frozen in place, watching intently, as if sensing something big is about to happen. The stage is set for a moment that could change everything. As the CEO stands before her, his commanding presence filling the room, the woman crosses her arms, trying to regain her footing. "Well," she sneers, "if you think your position alone is enough to intimidate me, you're mistaken. I've seen people like you bluff their way through life before." Her words, though harsh, now carry an edge of uncertainty. Without breaking eye contact, the CEO walks to a shelf along the wall, casually picking up a framed photo. He holds it up, revealing a picture of himself shaking hands with a prominent political figure. "Bluff, you say?" he asks, his tone still calm, but carrying a sharpness that makes her flinch. The woman stares at the photo, her bravado faltering. Before she can respond, the door to the office opens, and in walks an older gentleman in a tailored suit. He greets the CEO warmly, calling him by his first name. Then he turns to the woman, his expression serious. "You've caused quite a scene," he says. "Do you have any idea who you were speaking to?" The color drains from her face as the older man continues. "This is the founder of the very company you're standing in, and one of the sharpest minds I've had the privilege of working with." The room falls into a tense silence as the weight of the truth begins to sink in. The woman's face flushes with embarrassment, her confidence crumbling as the older man's words sink in. She glances at the CEO, who remains composed, his steady gaze making her feel smaller with each passing second. I didn't know," she stammers, struggling to find an excuse. "If I had known who you were." The CEO interrupts her with a calm but firm voice. "That's exactly the problem," he says. "You shouldn't need to know someone's title or position to treat them with respect. Your assumptions and judgments speak more about you than they ever could about me." The room falls silent again, but the tension is interrupted by a knock at the door. A young intern enters, looking nervous. "Excuse me, sir," he says to the CEO, holding up a folder. "I finished reviewing the proposal. Shall I present it to the client?" The CEO nods, then turns back to the woman. "You might want to take notes from him," he says, motioning to the intern. "He started here last month, yet he already understands the value of professionalism." As the woman begins to stutter out an apology, the older gentleman cuts in. "You are here today to pitch your company's services," he says bluntly. "But after witnessing your behavior, I think we'll pass." The woman freezes, her career ambitions suddenly crashing down around her. As she's escorted out of the office, the CEO picks up the photo again, placing it back on the shelf. He looks out at his employees through the glass walls, his steady gaze a reminder of the resilience and integrity that brought him here. The twist: just as the woman leaves the building, she overhears the CEO chatting with the intern. "Great work on that proposal," he says. "Keep it up, and you'll be running this place someday." For the first time, she realizes that respect, not arrogance, is the true mark of leadership. As the woman steps outside the building, the weight of what just happened sinks in. Her chest tightens, not from anger, but from shame. She realizes how her assumptions and arrogance led her to lose not just a potential business opportunity, but also the respect of everyone in that room. Inside, the office is buzzing again. The CEO returns to his desk, his focus shifting back to the tasks ahead. The intern, inspired by his mentor's calm strength, dives back into his work, determined to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. The employees who had witnessed the confrontation exchange quiet nods, a shared respect for their leader growing stronger. For the CEO, it's just another day. But for the woman, it's a turning point. Walking away from the towering building, she reflects on her actions, vowing to never again judge someone by appearances. Some lessons come hard, but they leave lasting change.